Hello, welcome everybody. I'm Tamandra Hartless, as it probably says on my screen. I'm chairing this online meeting at the request of Tom and the Data Ethics and Governance section of the Royal Statistical Society, of which I was a founder member, but I've stepped back a bit since becoming part of the RSS Council. The meeting is an hour long. It is being recorded. So I would ask everybody, not only the speakers, but everybody, to consider that what you say will be recorded and transcribed. And so be mindful of however strongly you might feel about something. Think of whatever you say as being put down in writing and potentially being made public. So please avoid libeling anybody or making accusations about individuals. So let's keep it very factual. We have three speakers, Tom King, Peter Wells and Sheila Bird, who are each going to speak for around 10 minutes. So we should have half an hour for discussion, although I will take factual questions after each speaker if there's anything you just want clarified. So we're going to run this the usual way. I imagine you're all very familiar with Teams by now. There's a little picture of a hand that says raise. If you want to speak, raise your hand and I will try and take you in the order in which you raise your hands, unless there's some particular reason why you think you should come in sooner, in which case please put that in the chat, I think, and then I will consider your appeal against the numerical order of speaking. So let us kick off, as we only have an hour. Tom, give us your 10 minutes.
So I am told you can see this, so I will proceed on that basis. So the first thing I wanted to say is, why are we speaking up at all? Isn't this not a statistical problem? And I think actually we've all been through that question and had to come to the idea that there was actually data involved, but not any statisticians. Which is probably something we should say something about. But actually, how could statistical thinking have helped is quite an important question, especially if we think about in the future, these are likely to be more statistical systems. And so we ought to think about the future as well, about more automation. So in thinking about this, I wrote something just as Sheila and Peter have. So you can see my blog online, but trying to think about what were the statistical issues we should be thinking about. And there was some professional responsibilities about how we communicate to people about these issues, that this clearly wasn't happening very well. Is what is coming across in the public inquiry. And actually then raising concerns when something might be going on. How do we explain a concern like that? And then we should also think about system design, about effective monitoring systems, both to evaluate how well something's working and the sort of surveillance to see when something's going wrong, to pick things up. So we have, serious statistical machinery that could use these systems. And then there's some governance that could be happening, both about publishing data so externally, so people could see this, rather than the media having to pursue these stories. And then the sort of understanding at the governance level, what do they need to do to really be supervising this properly, and how can we help? And that's what I'm going to go through. So I made some recommendations in my blog that we could be doing communication better. And what I'm going to go through is what we're actually doing. So you've probably heard a lot of people saying what's going wrong. So we actually saw this in the pandemic. There was a lot of data going on being used to justify decisions and not being very well communicated. So we ran a workshop at the beginning of last year, generally to set this out, get the big picture, and that's followed on with a network. So they're going to run a further workshop in the in the autumn. I think it's the 21st of November. They don't have much funding, so they're looking to work with other organizations to do more specific things. So there's a definite collaboration plan with the infectious disease models. We're working on setting up some other things. And then the other issue of raising concerns, there is guidance from the National Audit Office about whistleblowing that I thought was quite good. And they have this idea that you set a tone by how you react to bad news. So there's guidance you can sort of see within an organization how they react. And so on the obvious, you can think about how you talk about bad news, and that's quite interesting. But there's also an ISI working group that I'm a member of, and we're collecting case studies to share. So I got the chair to write about robo-debt in the magazine. If you have ideas for the magazine that you want to pitch stories, Chimandra is the chair, so you can tell her. Then I said about systems. Well, we're trying to engage the whole of the data science community towards professionalization. So we have this big project with others, and we wrote to the government's consultation about regulations of artificial intelligence. So they should put evaluation more into this. I cannot claim that we got them to focus on this, but we're certainly pushing what statistical skills can achieve if you have them within your systems as a part of a planning process with professionals doing that. And then you may have heard David Spiegelhalter speaking last week or the week before, I think, about his experience with public inquiry, how you can detect when things are going wrong. So there are these sorts of systems that can be set up within regulators and things like that. So we have in mind how this can work. And then the governance bit is the hard bit, because I think Sheila's going to talk about trying to get a hold of data. And I've tried to say that really we should be publishing data on this. And I've been sent back a long list of excuses, which I think are not the right thing to be doing. If we're going to have outcomes like prosecutions, we should be prepared to have official statistics published about this, is my view. And there's an algorithmic transparency recording standard that I think we need to develop to that next phase, that we're going to have to work on this. So this is where we're not making progress, really. So there is a consultation from the Committee on Standards in Public Life. So they look after the Nolan principles. You can see in the image there. And so we're going to, as a committee, respond to their consultation, saying what we think the role of statistics can be in helping. And I'm still stuck on this question of skills on boards, because the data science section, when it was first setting up more than 5 years ago, established that the data scientists felt that at board level, people weren't really on top of what was needed. And we still think that's a problem. And I'm not clear how we make that sort of change, but we're adamant that the boards need to be able to understand this a bit better. So I will just finish up here with the questions I wanted to put to the audience. Was, what do you want the RSS to do? We can do this work, publishing case studies and things like that, writing significantly. The RSS will talk to you if you have a concern about your professional situation. I'm not sure we're really on top of what is needed there, but this is a commitment at the moment. We are working through all these consultations to try and promote more development of public governance. And I think that's something that our section is doing work on further. And we're also working with other professional organizations. So the British Computer Society is more central to this problem of the post office. So they're already working on something, and we're going to work with them rather than try to tell them what to do. But we're also developing a plan to convene internationally. I said I'm on this working group at ISI. Actually, I'm also trying to work with people to convene a sort of workshop about that, because there's a lot of concern that all the different groups of people who are interested aren't really working together, because justice shouldn't be lost in the process. So that's all I was going to say. I hope that's not much longer than 10 minutes, but I've been, as we all are, a bit worked up about it. So thank you for listening.
No, I think by my clock, that was exactly 10 minutes. So you're setting a very good precedence, Tom. No hands have come up to ask for factual clarification. So I'm going to move straight on to Peter for his 10 minutes. Off you go, Peter.
Thank you, Tamandra. And I have tried to share some slides. I don't know if those are visible or not, but these are things I just quickly threw together. So actually, I first want to start.
We're getting the whole of your screen. So if you can go to slideshow, I think that will make it more visible for us.
Like that.
That's the one. Yeah, good.
Perfect. So firstly, I'm just going to say that I have slight jet lag as I landed from the west coast of America late last night. So apologies if I am even more incoherent than I typically am. So I put together some quick slides just for this, just to give some structure to my thoughts. I suppose actually following on from Tom, I'm focusing a bit more here on the issues and ways of thinking about the issues rather than steps forward, hoping to drive that kind of discussion. And the way, when I think of the post office, I think of it in terms of kind of some of the systems involved here and just different layers of what's happening. There was the Horizon IT system and associated services, which is where much of the initial commentary was focused, looking at this as a computer problem. There's a post office as an organization and the governance around the post office. And then there's a justice system where the prosecutions happened. And it's been interesting during the inquiry how a lot of focus has actually shifted more towards the justice system and the post office governance and slightly away from that computer system lens of Horizon, which I think is actually kind of useful. And stepping through those, the justice system, we could see, I suppose we can start to see that there's certainly challenges around the availability and the use of statistics on private prosecutions. So it was interesting, I was looking at this, one of the House of Commons or House of Lords Justice Committees had to actually ask a minister for data about ongoing private prosecutions because that information is collected but not put into the public domain. I know from conversations I've had, even if it was in the public domain, knowing who would use it is actually a real challenge. Is that data, with those statistics, actually be connected to a lever that would drive some kind of action to investigate potential concerns? And that's a concern I've heard raised at quite a senior level in government. There's also an issue around availability and use of information about similar prosecutions. One of the things you can see around the scandal is that legal professionals, whether it be judges, whether it be solicitors, lawyers, etc., in their different roles, where the information was not correctly disclosed, apparently, by the post office /Fujitsu, and this was not evident or shared across multiple ongoing prosecutions. So it's very difficult for legal professionals to establish, was there a similar case to mine? Has something similar happened before? What's been disclosed before? And could I look at that and use that as part of giving a fair justice process to somebody who's being prosecuted? And that's a real challenge, not just around this scandal, but has applied in some of the other court cases that are ongoing. Again, a data-driven problem, a potential data-enabled solution. There's a presumption of reliability of computer evidence, which affected some of the prosecutions in this case, not all, but affected some of the prosecutions, and certainly seems to have affected some of the behaviour around the instance that was going on here, around the legal presumption of reliability, and also kind of the social presumption that computers tell us the right thing. People do trust computers more than humans, as silly as we humans are. And that's an interesting facet of the justice system, which potentially needs to be picked up. And go back to actually to Tom's point, and possibly Sheila's as well, there's a broad understanding or lack of understanding of statistics, data, digital computers, which is evident when you look at some of the challenges that were going on in the various court cases. There's actually there's a fascinating facet of when a computer system or statistics system goes through a court case. We tend to get a really good description at the other end because legal professionals are really good at trying to break things down to how they work. But often it takes a little bit of time to get there, and that needs a court case to be given sufficient time when it is first trying to establish a system. I'm still looking for some of the first court cases of generative AI and copyright are going to give us some of the best explanations of generative AI systems we can hope for. But zooming in from the justice system towards the post office, certain issues around public sector and corporate governance there. I don't know if people have read all the way back, for example, to Jeff Milgan's memo that got released by the inquiry when Horizon was first commissioned back in the late 90s. And that followed various debates under the previous, back in the mid-90s around what was happening there, but all the way through to the current day, who is responsible for certain activities, who's liable. In a little preamble to this session, when the post office, which was previously owned by the Royal Mail Group, but has been split off, now the Royal Mail Group is being sold off, are any liabilities going with that sell-off? I think was one that Sheila raised a good point. It's a very tangled web. Who is liable? Who is responsible? How can we make that clear? There's certainly professional responsibilities at the level of the post office, which don't appear to have been respected. Those may not have been statistics professional responsibilities, but legal professional responsibilities that don't appear to have been abided by or well understood by people impacted by those responsibilities. Auditing challenges, monitoring and evaluation, which Tom covered. I'll cover that in slightly more detail in a second. And again, that general understanding of statistics, data, digital. And for me, often that lack of understanding is kind of a feature of the world rather than a bug. It's a lot of the things we talk about are obscure. They do worry some people. So there's only so far we can go in increasing understanding. Sometimes we have to deal with that challenge that not everyone understands it to a similar professional level. So we need to communicate differently with that awareness. But then zooming into Horizon itself, and I often get challenged by a focus on computer systems rather than how those computer systems manifest to people and what in the world of technology professionals nowadays we'd often call services or products rather than actually a computer system. At that level, there appears to have been a lack of professional responsibilities. And this is very common. As somebody who has very much recognized, I've been into the talks about Horizon given by some of the people who worked on it back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And as somebody who's been in similar rooms, I very much recognize the situation and that the people in those rooms aren't professionals. The people who, if somebody was to build a bridge or design a house, there are professional responsibilities that come with it. That is not the same for computer systems and services. The BCS, I know, have thoughts on that, but there's a challenge about drawing the right lines around those things. There's an issue around design practices. The Horizon, the information and the data held by Horizon could be changed without good auditing, without good awareness of the people impacted by changing information. In a very well-designed computer system, that should not be possible. And we're willing to look at kind of some of those detailed design practices to make sure they provide the information which is necessary for monitoring, evaluation, auditing, production of statistics, for example. That does not appear to have been there and clearly thought into the design of that system and service. There's a system service level performance monitoring and evaluation, which is often missing from a lot of services and public services even to the present day. How well is Horizon performing today? How well would we know that? If I was a sub-postmaster today, how worried should I be? Or could I be about some of the issues in there? We generally don't know. There is very little performance monitoring and evaluation availability. And as Tom mentioned, whistleblowing. I was certainly struck by a talk I was at by someone who worked on the system for 6 months, saying they saw the issues. They chose not to whistleblow fully because they feared being banned from the industry. And despite that, only by raising internal complaints, they felt that they had to move country to be employed after working on Horizon, purely after raising internal complaints within Fujitsu Post Office. And that must be a horrible situation for anyone to be in. And then, as Tom mentioned, there's a future growth in statistical type processes within systems like Horizon and the associated services around it. So the rise of AI-enabled systems, the use of AI in many places, which may or may not be appropriate, but we often use technology in inappropriate and/or appropriate places. That's us as humans. We are going to see more statistical processes in systems like that. Appears to be the trend. That is the push. So for me, there is a large step of being more aware of that, being more aware that the systems and services at the core of issues like Horizon, Post Office, and the justice system are becoming more non-deterministic, more statistical in nature, and that generates a need to be more careful about issues like this and building appropriate governance so that they can be spotted and mitigated appropriately when those issues inevitably occur, as much as we can try to mitigate them through better design practices. And in almost exactly 10 minutes, I think that covered the points I wanted to make. You're on mute, Samantha. You're muted, Tamandra.
So I think I might have accidentally muted myself after having been off mute. Yeah, fantastic timekeeping. Well done, both of you. Tom mentioned in the chat that he could post the links that were in his slideshow in the chat, and I think that would be very helpful, Tom. That'd be a great thing to do. And in general, if any of you have links to more relevant material and you want to put it in the chat, it's a very convenient way for other people to be able to save it and click through to it. So, Sheila, see if you can do your sticking to the 10 minutes as well as the boys did.
Okay, I'm not sure whether, Tom, you've got my slides or whether I try and use them from here.
I would suggest that you try to use them from there if that's possible, just because then you can click them. But if that's going to be complicated, then maybe Tom can share them and you can do next slide, please, and we can all have flashbacks.
Do you see my slides? No. Okay, I'm stuck on how I do the share screen bit.
Maybe Tom, maybe you could run them. Would that be all right? And Sheila, request the next slide.
Yep.
So I'm wrong. Technology is the problem.
Yeah.
Or Sheila, the top right-hand corner.
At the share bit.
It's all right.
There we go. That's that's working. And yes, there we go. Look, brilliant.
Okay, and so now we'll do. Has that worked? No. Oh.
Yes, I can see one of your slides.
Okay, shall I just leave it at that?
Or is that Tom? Are you running it, Tom?
I am sharing my screen to show the slide, so we will need next slide, please.
Okay.
Okay. So let me just start. Apologies for the hiatus, ladies and gentlemen. This is really where I came into the Post Office Horizon inquiry off the back of having worked on the infected blood statistics expert group, where an issue often was that counts from different organisations didn't match and we needed to use judgment. But what struck me about the Post Office Horizon inquiry was that I was not aware that the prosecution counts, either annually or as we've looked at in 3-year eras, were actually in the public domain, either for Scotland, where there were no private prosecutions, and so the Post Office investigators had to go through Scotland, the Scottish courts and Procurator Fiscal Service in order to bring a prosecution in Scotland, versus in England and Wales. Now, just on a population pro rata basis, you'd expect more than 10 times as many cases in England and Wales as in Scotland. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I think I'm doing this myself. Are you seeing my screen, folks? So I collaborated with Mark Howarth, a journalist whom I'd encountered because he had followed up on a paper of mine on opioid-related deaths versus non-opioid-related deaths in Scotland versus England and Wales. And so I asked Mark if he might try to approach Scotland's Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service to get from Scotland the counts of Post Office Horizon prosecutions. Meanwhile, I would try in England and Wales through the Post Office Horizon inquiry, because, of course, in England and Wales, these were private prosecutions for the most part by the Post Office, and so it might need a Rule 9 letter from the Post Office inquiry to out the information. Now, can I just check with people whether they are seeing my slides? Can anybody tell me?
We're seeing your slides, but I think it's Tom who's operating them.
Okay, so you should now be on a slide, Scottish convictions by start year in 3-year eras. And so the information we got from Scottish courts and Procurator Fiscal Service was that there were 11 prosecutions, Post Office prosecutions, where the start year was in 2000 to 2002. So these are 3-year eras. 10 in the next 3 years, 15 in 2006 to 2008, 8 in 2009 to 2011, and 9 in 2012 to 2014. So an average, so it's a total of 53, an average of 10.6 per 3-year era. No particular pattern. And then through a witness contribution to the Post Office inquiry, which Mark Howarth brought to my attention before the Post Office inquiry sent the witness statement to me, we have the following information for Post Office cases in England and Wales. Now, on the left-hand side of the screen are data for 1991 to 93, so the 3-year era. And there were 2 prosecutions, 94 to 96, 7, 97 to 99, 40. And then the information we had was on an annual basis for 2000, 2001, 2002. And you can see there is a shift between non-horizon prosecutions and horizon prosecutions, so that by 2002, of the 62 prosecutions, 60 of them were horizon related. And so the right-hand panel of the table is now for the 3-year eras in the 21st century, so like Scotland's data. And for the first of those, 2000 to 2002, there were 33 non-horizon cases, 96 horizon cases, so a total of 129. In the next 3 years, that leapt to 185, and then 164, and then a major decrease 2012 to 2014 down to 79. So very strongly patterned. Now, what we don't know for sure about the data for England and Wales is whether these are the start date of prosecutions, we think not, or the end date of prosecutions. And even if supposedly the end date, whether this was actually consistent over the years. But there is sufficient information here to suggest that questions should have been asked. So next slide, please. So we have that there was no apparent oversight of private prosecutions in England and Wales. When you consider that the majority of those convictions have now been redressed by Parliament, there are questions to ask, I think, not just about the oversight of private prosecutions or indeed whether there should be any private prosecutions, but also questions about the testing of evidence in the UK courts, the Scottish courts, as well as those in England and Wales. And so, last slide, please. As you know, sub-postmasters and postmistresses have been found guilty and sent to jail. It remains to be seen whether malfeasance in public office will be a charge brought about some of those who were involved in the background of those prosecutions. Thank you. And apologies for the bad handling of slides.
And yet, in spite of that, you still came in well within your 10 minutes. So well done, all of you. So we do have just under half an hour for discussion. I'm going to suggest that I open it to everybody, but to come back a couple of times to Tom, Peter and Sheila for their commentary. And I'd also suggest that there's two broad areas that we might want to discuss. One is, as Tom posed right at the beginning, what should the RSS do in response to the post office prosecutions in particular, i.e. do we need to make a response as a society? If so, what should it be? But I think the other question that's come up throughout all the presentations is, what are the implications for what the RSS might do in future, both narrowly in terms of keeping an eye on things that might be related to statistics and data in terms of public life, and being involved in that kind of oversight on a professional level and possibly taking positions, but also very broadly, I think questions have already come up about professional standards and sometimes the lack of them where they would have been useful, and a general increase in awareness of the role that statistics and data can play, both in oversight and looking out for potential future problems or things that are not being brought into public awareness yet, but also in terms of better practices and averting this kind of situation altogether. So please click the little raise hand thing. Whoa, look, and first off the post, there we have Andrew Garrett. Over to you, Andrew.
Thanks, Amanda. Thank you, everybody, for your presentations. I mean, I think your presentations were great. I think you summed it up well, Amanda. I mean, to me, there are two separate issues. One is around the post office, and one is around sort of future systems. And I mean, on the post office itself, I mean, it feels to me like it was a failure of governance. I think people did know what was probably happening and didn't ask the right questions at various levels. Would additional data have helped? Possibly, but I don't think data is the key element with the post office. I think both Fujitsu, government, and the post office management probably knew various things were happening, and so I think it's oversight and governance. I think for the RSS, the bigger issue is around computer systems, particularly as they move from deterministic to stochastic. So essentially moving to AI. I think this is where Tom has come from a little bit on this. This could be a bigger issue because there are ways of testing deterministic systems. I mean, in the pharma industry, we have 21 CFR Part 11. It's all around maintenance of systems, requirements, specs, etc. I mean, those systems should be built well. However, once you get into AI systems, I think it's a whole new area about how do you manage them through the life cycle of the product. So not only how do you implement them in the first place, but how do you check that they are doing what they should be doing through time and there's not a degradation of performance. And I think that is a whole area. And the RSS has made a case for, in the responses to the white papers, etc., about the need to have a sort of center to evaluate AI and have basically a list of systems registered, so there's more transparency around that. So I think for the RSS, the bigger issue is around future systems and their performance, given that they are stochastic.
Great, thank you. Very good point. Oh, now here come the hands. Okay, so I'll take you in the order in which you put your hands up. So let's go first to, it's Paul. Is it Paul Allen or is it Alan Paul? Anyway, whoever you are, off you go.
Yeah, thank you, Tamandra. It's Paul Allen. I'm the RSS's Honorary Officer for National Statistics. I wanted to pick up on the idea of statistics on private prosecutions. All the speakers said, in a sense, they were only known to the post office, if you like. That's what Andy's suggesting, and I think that's probably right. But I'm grateful to Anna Powell-Smith of the Centre for Public Data, who pointed out that the government is actually committed to produce a register of private prosecutions a few years ago. That was following criticism by the Justice Committee that I think some of the speakers referred to. But so there's the first set of problems. You can commit to something, or you can get the government to commit to something, but it doesn't happen. And how do we make it happen? Just supposing we moved to the magic land when it did happen, how visible would all this be? I think that's also was a point that kind of the speakers were pointing out. The post office management may have known, but what about anybody else, other interested parties? How would they know that there were statistics about prosecutions, even if they were published? I'm actually a great believer in the kind of the curious browser, and if information is available, some people will at least find it, but that's not the whole answer. You need better visibility. So what's the RSS doing about this? This is promising a lot, which is going to take a long time to deliver, but we're trying to kind of develop the concept of kind of more public statistics. So these official statistics are not just for the government, but they are for the public, they're for businesses, they're for the media, they're for academics, they're for all interested parties. And in that, there's a kind of a supply side and the demand side issue. The supply side is getting more statistics out there and encouraging people, but the demand side is also more generally plays into the RSS's role about kind of raising statistical skills, statistical awareness, people being familiar with statistics, being happy to handle them, to answer questions about them. We're going to find plenty of examples over the next few weeks, I'm sure, where some rather interesting figures are quoted, and how do people respond to those? So that's no help for the Scottish, for the prosecution, for the post office. It's going to be very difficult to get those data out. I think the statistics are very difficult to get out. But I hope there's some way forward we can learn from this and build this into our wider work. Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks. Sheila.
Just to add to Andy's points about stochastic AI, there was on the Today programme, I think it was this morning or yesterday, an item about hospital computing and consultants' letters to patients going missing. And I think the inquiry they had conducted was within England and Wales, but the same would apply, I'm sure, in Scotland. And I think this is a major issue, computer systems not handling properly letters from doctors to patients. And I certainly know of examples in Scotland where that has occurred. For simple reasons, like the computer system for a hospital for sick children doesn't actually check that the age of the patient is a child, not an adult. Basic checks that you would think would be written into a computer system, so that how could adult letters end up in a children's hospital and never be sent to the correct recipient?
Well, I think that's a reminder of what the couple of you already said, that it's not only a problem within the computer system, but it's also a problem about the overall system within which the computer is working, and governance and people taking responsibility for what might be quite common sense interventions. Peter.
Thanks, Amanda. I suppose just building on a couple of those points, actually back to what you just mentioned as well. So things like missing letters or a rise in prosecutions by a significant amount, those are the kind of things that could be highlighted by appropriate monitoring, evaluation, assurance techniques. It's whether someone is looking at those, designing in the governance so somebody's looking for those alarm bells and then acting on it is often the real challenge. When I used to work in the telecommunications sector, We had entire teams of people assuring flows of data because there was billions of pounds of revenue and hundreds of thousands of people at stake. I seem to find that's not as common a practice in other sectors, and maybe we did it really badly in telecoms as well. Who knows? Specifically on the private prosecutions point, I spoke with somebody who was close to the Attorney General's office at a time when some of these prosecutions were peaking. They'd gone back and checked, that person had gone back and checked their own personal records, and their belief was, even if they'd known about the peak, there was nobody who would have been looking for a peak, and that was their responsibility. Nobody would have been looking for a peak from a particular organisation in a particular kind of case, because they didn't know that was something that they could or should be doing to some extent. So it wasn't necessarily their prioritisation. That's a real challenge. Moving on to the point around the future, the more stochastic systems. Again, I think the challenge there is going to be evaluating at the right level of the system, understanding safety at the right level, and connecting those safety measures to somebody who's going to act on it if there's alarms. I suppose a challenge I see with the current focus in AI world, and this is not specific to the RSS, is people are focused on the AI models rather than the services, product systems that those AI models are embedded in, and it's at that level where humans get affected. The AI model itself just runs on a computer in its own little thing, doing its stuff. I don't care. It's when it impacts humans. I particularly care about that, and monitoring at the right level is going to be key.
I suppose this throws up an interesting challenge for the RSS in terms of how we take a position, if we do, on quality assurance for AI systems and computer systems generally, and systems that use data and statistics, that there comes a point where it's really not specific at all to computers or data or AI, that it is simply a matter of saying, actually, you should take responsibility for things that you initiate and run, and actually you should have governance for things that you're doing, regardless of whether you're doing it with old brown envelopes full of paper or whether it's a high-tech computer system. And I mean, to some extent, I think the very existence of a data ethics and governance section suggests that we do take account of that much wider picture. But there may be points, I guess, where somebody would turn around and say, why are you taking a professional interest in this? This is surely beyond your remit. And maybe we need to prepare some of our arguments to justify our presence around that table. Tom, I'm sure you have stuff to say on this.
Yes. I think that's exactly the problem. Showing that statisticians should be present at this table is really what we discussed when the RSS talked about its new strategy, that this is happening without statisticians present often, and it's their loss. And I think actually this came through in setting up this computer system when the post office board started to understand it wasn't quite right. They understood that postmasters had never used computer systems before and they needed training. They understood that post offices weren't really designed to fit this in because they were in people's homes and things, and they understood these very concrete things about the current post office. Never at any point did they discuss what was happening at the data center and how transactions were verified, and how the middleware processed things and messages could get lost. And they didn't having heard there was something wasn't quite right, they focused on the problems they did understand and not actually the whole system. And actually having this idea of the big picture is important. And you need a statistician to go, well, yes, that is a problem, but there's something else here. Keep pressing people and have, if we need to have people who understand these things on the board in order to say, yes, but that's what we need to do. But there's a deeper problem here that sometimes a system could go wrong because the whole system went down, a standard, network failure or something. These little bugs that affected actually much smaller systems got lost among the lots of errors. And actually this understanding of how a system go wrong is something you only know if you've really worked on this. You've got that sort of expertise, and or you've set up systems to detect anomalies. And I feel sometimes we're going wrong with some of these ideas about auditing systems for bias. We're looking at the gross picture without looking for what individual outcomes can be. And we need a bit more understanding of really the human impacts of all of this. And the statistical tools can do both. We know that. We can look for extreme outcomes and search for the averages. But nobody's asked us to do anything. I don't think they're going to. So we need to put that forward.
Thank you, Tom. Sheila, you want to come back?
Yes. John Deeks, who co-chaired the Royal Statistical Society's working group on diagnostic tests, is giving a talk at a conference in St Andrews today about that working group report. And the report points out that the performance of a test changes as the context of use of the test changes. Now, life gets even more complicated when in the background of a test is machine learning or an AI algorithm, so that if you use the test first in the so-called two-gate system, when you're comparing those who definitely got a cancer, for instance, with those who definitely don't have, so you've taken away all the noise, then one version of the algorithm may be appropriate in working out the performance of the test in that context. And then you go into a different context of people who've turned up at an oncology department with, I think there's something not quite right, and you use the test there. The algorithm you would expect would actually need to change. And then when you go into the screening context, there'll be a further change. So I think it's really important that we gain some understanding of what the machine learning or AI algorithm is doing in each of these contexts and how it changes. So it's not just monitoring changes of the study design and the protocol, but it's actually monitoring the versions of the algorithm. Because actually, I would expect the algorithm to have to change. And I wouldn't be critical of its having to change, but I would be critical about an absence of transparency and an absence of public understanding of what these new tools mean and how we need to monitor them for the public good, as Tom would say.
Vigorous nodding all around for those points. I'm actually going to slightly abuse my chair's privilege now. I'm going to bring Giles in first, as we've not heard from him before, and then come back to Andrew. So Giles, step up.
Hi everyone, I'm Giles Piggy. I'm a data scientist and vice chair of the AI group at the RSS. Firstly, thanks for organising this talk. I think it's brilliant that we're doing it. And secondly, apologies, I didn't join until the end of your bit, Tom, so it might well be that this has already been talked about. I wonder whether there's an opportunity for us to say how the use of statistics might have averted this problem. And this is not necessarily a kind of fully thought through idea, but it seems to me, and my knowledge is pretty much only from what's been in the I guess the popular press and on TV. But you had the central idea of, was this system uncovering a higher level of fraud that nobody had known about versus was there something wrong with the system? And that seems to me like something that you could run a Bayesian analysis on, and could have done that, many years ago, and looked at the probability and been able to, present that to the people in higher up, who could have then looked at that and said, well, if this is the for this to have uncovered a level of fraud that we never knew, this would be how likely that is versus this is how likely there is a glitch in the system. So I think there could be just like a story to really elevate the fact that, if statistics had been used, maybe not at the start, but, when suddenly there were all these cases, all of this could have been averted.
Very good point. Thank you. Andrew, you get your turn now.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think I think the anomaly detection thing is really important, and then maybe swapping it around. It's more around process control, so manufacturing, etc. Standard use statistical process control, and really there it's more around. The focus is very much on establishing what your process is, and being assured that it is under control. So it's sort of anomaly detection, but effectively what you're looking to do is always to see that it's under control within certain range. I think the issue that we have with all this stuff is just how many processes do you want to monitor? And the post office must have a multitude of processes that they would look to control. And I think it's a danger of being a little bit sort of wise after the event on this one, because I think we can all see that if private prosecutions or even prosecutions in total had been monitored, it could have been detected. Now, I still think effectively it was detected. It's just people didn't do anything about it. But it could have added to the weight of evidence. It could have added other people. But just how many processes out there are there that you want to control? And I think that's the challenge that we all face, because it's easy to say we should have looked at this, etc. But how many other things are out there that could jump out and hit us hard on these things? It's very difficult to know because there's just so many processes around these days. But I fundamentally would just go back. I still think this is a management oversight failure, and people knew about this ultimately.
Well, perhaps this is a job for AI, that we need an AI program that can scan processes at a rate that humans can't possibly manage and flag up, like the very good pattern matching ones for medical scans, could flag up anomalies in statistics and say some human should have a look at this because this looks pretty weird to us. We have about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to certainly come back to Tom, Peter, and Sheila for final thoughts. Sounds a bit morbid, but maybe summaries is what I'm trying to say. And Sheila, you've already got your hand up, so why don't you kick us off first?
Well, in the significance online piece, we raised the issue that postmasters were being told you are the only one. Now, that would be the only one in a particular region, or the only one who was being investigated by a specific investigator. That investigator, if truthful, would only be able to say that once to any individual. So one of the unknowns, as far as we were concerned, was how many investigators did the post office have? Because having audited deaths in Scottish prison custody, which are subject to fatal accident inquiry, and the system in Scotland, as I think elsewhere, is that an inquest happens in the region, the area where the death occurs. So when there were such inquests, and if it were a contentious inquest, then the Scottish Prison Service would always have the same barrister, whereas the late prisoner's family would have a different solicitor, maybe not even a barrister. And the prosecutor and the defending barristers, or at least the barristers for the Scottish Prison Service, knew about examples of the same problem in different regions because they were in common. The legal people were in common. The judge wasn't necessarily in common. The sheriff wasn't. So again, there is a sort of a convenient blindness sometimes. And I think Andy's right, that is always going to be a difficulty.
Excellent. Peter, can I come to you next for your summary thoughts?
Yeah, of course. So I suppose. So I think there is a general acceptance that yes, some of the governance layers around the post office, Fujitsu post office, wider UK government, knew about this, knew about the issues before it was agreed they should be resolved. They knew that something was going wrong before it was agreed something should be tackled. I suppose, and I'm just thinking a little bit, challenging myself, because I very much accept that, and I'm skeptical of data and statistics for data and statistics' sake. Following up on Giles's point of, is there an argument to say, what could be interventions that gave people more evidence to overcome that, that would help overcome that reluctance as a governance layer to address an issue which is staring them in the face? Is there ways to give recommendations about how systems are designed, processes are developed, or new AI systems are developed, which starts to surface that information in a way that gives slightly levels the playing field about access to information without being too naive, but starts to level that playing field as a way of starting to address some of the power imbalances, which is a thing that's just going through my head with my slight jet lag, and you should pass to Tom before I blather even more to Andrew.
Thank you. So, Tom, I think it's very apt that you get the last word here. So, give us your summary thoughts on this, and maybe if you have a particular thought about what the RSS could take forward, then this is a good time to make it.
Yeah, I think this being wise after the event is a problem, because this started in the 90s when some of these tools that we might use now were really existing, and the governance we have for statistics now, well, the act wasn't passed until 2007. So, it's harder to say what could have been done better that we might like. I've listened to some of the evidence. I've been quite struck that although Andy says you could monitor lots of things, if they were employing any statistical tools to monitor things, it hasn't caught my eye in any evidence. And I suspect that's not what they've been doing, because all of these people said they'd been put into these roles for audit and fraud detection without any training. So the big thing I was really sad about is these people were supposed to be doing sort of monitoring of trends and have no statistical skills or investment at all. And I did feel that there was a big training gap that would have benefited them. And I feel so many organizations would benefit from actually investing in the statistical skills of people doing things, quite simple things, where they're supposed to be monitoring data. Actually, although Andy says, well, you just need to decide what to control and what the normal range is. That's a good start, but not everybody has made. And then the tools to do that. Well, yes, you need a statistician to help. I feel sad that they didn't have statisticians help. I feel that's what I would like us to change, and that's why I want us to work with the British Computer Society, who are more closely engaged with all of this. So I hope the RSS will have something to report or broaden from engagement with the British Computer Society, which I know is organising a summit next month. So we hope that something will come from that. I'm very pleased that some people have come and that we should try to do something, but I think we're still not sure what it is.
Thank you. Well, I think that's a very, very honest way to take it forward. But as various people have said, I think part of that is because there are lessons to be learned at all sorts of levels from this, from really specific, could data and or statistics have averted this whole situation, to the very broad, what are the implications going forward as AI comes to play more of a role. So thank you all for coming. This has been really enlightening and useful discussion. Tom did post links to things in the chat, so I don't know if we can leave the chat up for a couple of minutes to give people a chance to save those links if they want to. But if not, I'm sure you can get hold of Tom and he can pass them on to you. So thank you especially to Tom, Sheila and Peter for preparing this. Thanks all for turning up, and look forward to seeing you at future Royal Statistical Society events, discussions, and whatever else we get up to.